Hello, everybody. So this is another of our broadcasts. Today we have a guest who is actually right here with
Hello.
me, and she's finished her PhD actually doing research in Indonesia. So I hope it will be very interesting for you to hear about Christine's views. So Dr. Christine Feeney, I trust, will help us discuss today issues which are critical to professional development. So maybe Andrew remembers better, but there is this slide somewhere or a little meme where people say, who is after innovation? And everybody wants innovation. And the next question is, who wants to change? And nobody wants to raise their hand. So that's the thing. We all want innovation, but as long as it doesn't actually threaten me. So today we talk about conflict, deliberation, and professional expertise. I'll just ask Christine how she actually connected these concepts. But let me read out today first what we've written on the slide. So learning implies change. Change can be painful, as it may require confrontation of long held beliefs. However, our beliefs are also the building blocks of change. In other words, without the old, the new will not emerge. Our guest, Dr. Christina Feeney, will talk to us about her research in Indonesia and why she came up with all these three concepts and why were they important and what they did to her. So I'll give now space to Dr. Feeney to actually start the discussion. And I ask my guests today, not guests, my home team to interrupt Christine, ask difficult questions, and we will also check the discussion board to see how many people are actually also engaging in the discussion. So, Christine, could you start talking to us and say something that might actually get our discussion going?
Great. Yes. Thank you,
Your
Anya.
PowerPoint disappeared.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. If you could put that PowerPoint up.
Your PowerPoint disappeared.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to that in a moment. But what I'm going to talk to you about today, yes, is my research and how we can actually look at how our own beliefs can become more flexible when we've worked through some problems in our belief structure. So we can get to that place of innovation when we are working through our innate problem-solving abilities in the flash drive. Just take the flash drive out. And yeah, we'll be talking about that today. And patterns and rhythms are a normal part of life. It's when we rely upon our habits in different circumstances that we get ourselves into trouble.
Okay, so basically, what you're saying here is you're trying to solve this problem is that what did you say? Patterns
and routines and rhythms. We get ourselves into habits of doing things the way we've always done them. And as we do them, then we want to keep doing them. But when a situation changes, we need to change as well. And our belief pattern will allow us to do that if we are in a habit of actually deliberating. And so we've got to know where that deliberation comes in.
so Andrew, would you like to comment a little bit on that?
No. When I say no, hello, Christine.
Hello, Andrew.
Of course, I agree with it. I mean, why? How could you not? But I think one of the interesting things, one of the interesting discursive things that Christine has done so far is she's talking not so much about. I mean, yes, she mentioned patterns, and she talked about habits, but she's also talked about rhythms, and rhythms are repeating structures which guide us and which make us comfortable, but at the same time rhythms are also part of the ways in which our bodies are constructed. So it's not there's not really a huge separation between the rhythms of life and the rhythms of the body. I mean, they are different kinds of rhythms, but they're all rhythmic structures, and they're all intertwined in some way. It's actually quite interesting to see that there are institutes around the world that study rhythms, both at the individual level and at the institutional level, at the macro level. Um, and So I'll just leave it at that. I mean, one of the interesting things for me about rhythms, one of the obvious things for me about rhythms in Thailand, for example, is that coming from a background in Australia and in Europe, um, for example, Christmas time is a time of rest and relaxation, and then suddenly in Thailand it doesn't work. It's just a normal everyday. It's just a normal everyday day, and so your body and your mind are expecting downtime at a particular moment of the year, but it doesn't come, and these are rhythmic structures that are part of our lives, which are part of our knowledge system, if you like, or a part of our understanding of the world, and they get disrupted. So I think one of the problems with rhythms and professional and learning is that disruption and in a sense the violation of structures that we hold dear and which are an integral part of who we are.
So by
So
rhythm, you
anyway,
mean what, Andrew?
Anya
So
wanted.
by rhythm, you mean what, Andrew?
I mean, repeating
In terms,
structures,
right. So
things
in terms,
that come back at regular intervals.
right.
So
Say
language has a rhythm. Language
ins-
has a rhythm.
language has a rhythm, but
Movement has a rhythm.
institutional there's a rhythm of an institution, right? So now we do this,
There
now
is
we
a
do
rhythm
that,
of an institution,
and
right?
and
And
this
we
is
at
how
this
we do
time of
that.
year we do this. Yes. And if we don't do it that way at that time, then we have a problem. I mean, it's not necessarily a big problem, but it's a problem in the sense that it's a disruption to the ways in which we are led to expect the world to be. A long time ago, Roland Barthes said something like, the most intimate form, the disruption of rhythms by other people is the most intimate form of tyranny.
That's interesting.
And it is. And in French, the word intimacy in that sense is much deeper than it is in English. It's the most intimate form of it means it's the most profound, deepest, most shattering form of tyranny that you can have, because you or your body or your mind want to do one thing, and then somebody says, no, no, you must do it my way, or there will be problems, and it's too bad if you can't get your natural rhythm organized. So you have to comply, and if you comply, then your rhythms break, and institutions do this all the time.
Yes, yeah. Well, one of the things I found in my work is I was looking at both Dewey in my literature review was Dewey's work of looking at experience, how that's a pattern between reflection and your beliefs and your actions. But I also looked at indigenous knowledge scholarship and looking at the rhythms that are part of their ways of knowing. And in some ways, we can look at Dewey and say he's looking at a very detailed point of view and just very specific things. And on the other hand, we look at indigenous knowledge scholarship and we see that they're looking at the big picture. So I was really delighted when I was working through my research findings to see both the big and the details together by having both of those lenses, both of those vantage points. And I think when we've got both the big picture and the details, we can understand those rhythms a little bit better.
So not everybody in listening to us will understand the literature enough. Could you just give us an example of Dewey's detail and indigenous big picture? Just a detail, not necessarily foundational, but just detail.
Okay, so
Examples.
Dewey was he's known as the father of some aspects of our current education system. He's very focused on inquiry, and he wanted us to learn things by making inquiry. And many education systems, including in Indonesia, have got a problem-based or an inquiry-based learning approach. So that was his detail. He said, we've got to make questions, we've got to inquire, we've got to look at the details. Whereas on the other hand, the indigenous scholars will tell us that we've got to look at the relationships. How is everything connected to everything else? And looking at big things that are in those connections. So rather than just having, and they do discuss inquiry, but it's within the relationships. So when they're looking at the environment, they may have a relationship with the tree and learning that this tree, say for example, in my yard, there's a kakadu plum tree. They'll learn that this kakadu plum tree is available to eat actually at this month of the year in May. And they'll know certain things about the relationship of that tree that'll drop its leaves after it's fruited. And in the dry season, it will have no leaves. And so the indigenous knowledge scholars, they look at the big picture, what's happening in the big rhythms, whereas Dewey will look at the finer details. Let's see what's
relevant to this project, right?
Yes.
Or to this little sort of thing we're investigating. Okay.
Yeah. So in my research, you can see on the screen, I've got 5 questions there that really can help us dive a little bit deeper into our professional growth. We want professional growth. We want innovations. So, okay, let's ask ourselves some what if questions. What if we revitalize patterns of diverse interaction? Both Dewey and Indigenous scholars will say we need diverse interaction. Yeah, I can.
So diverse interaction meaning people thinking differently.
Absolutely, yes. People from different backgrounds, the Indigenous knowledge people, even from different tribes, different suku, they would meet occasionally and talk to people from different tribes. Even in Indonesian language, when you look straight up, what's the first thing you say to somebody? It's apa kabar, which literally translates as what's news. You know, in English, we'll say people, how are you? But in Indonesian, we'll ask people, what's the news? So they want that diverse interaction. What's the news where you are? So what if we get back into those patterns of starting to ask people what's happening in your space as actually the first point of encounter at a professional development workshop? We don't have to limit it just to social.
But if we train our future teachers and we have our own scholarship, I'm looking at my own college of education where I work. I think everybody agrees on everything. So I mean, the question what's
I think that
new?
They want to keep the peace. Actually, I think they don't want long meetings.
So what you're saying, we need a little bit more of conflict here.
I'm saying that if we really want innovation and we really want growth, we need to actually have that intimacy that Dr. Andrew was talking about just before. And I have a saying about intimacy. It plays on the word intimacy, which is basically into you, I see. It uses some of the same letters.
That's lovely.
Intimacy. Into you, I see. So when we have an intimate relationship with someone or even an organization, we understand into this organization, into this person. I see what drives them. I see what is in their life. So if we actually started off our professional growth sessions with apa kabar, what's the news, and took an interest in each other, then we'd grow from that place of feeling comfortable with each other instead of just, okay, when is this meeting going to finish? I need to get out of here. You know, we often go to staff meetings and looking at the watch. But if we can revitalize those social patterns and find that intimacy, then we can build on that. Once we know that, that's my next question. What if we spent time reflecting on what we want? What are our macro and micro goals? So we've got some big picture goals. One big picture goal might be that we want our organization to thrive. We want some innovation, or we want to actually have peace in this organization. And our micro goals might be, I want as a teacher to understand past tense or future tense in English, or it may be I want the students in my class to behave well, or it may be I want to know how to talk to parents as a teacher. There can be all sorts of micro goals that as we come into that, first of all, meeting, if we say to each other, what's news? And you can say, oh, I don't know how to deal with these parents. We're revitalizing the pattern of diverse interaction, and we're talking about our goals. And from there, we can go forward. So then the next question is, what if we deliberated the input or information from others into our sense making? What if I actually took the time to stop and listen to Anya, who says, well, actually, this is how I deal with parents, or this is how I can figure out past tense, or this is how I, whatever her or my macro goal is, that I'm a micro goal that I'm talking to her about. And the next question is, what if we see conflict as a tool? So maybe Anya says to me, oh, I do this with parents. And I'd say, that's ridiculous. That would take a long time. Or you want me to go out of my way to have a parent meeting? Or you want, and one of my examples from my own research was one of the teachers said, I'm dealing with student theft, like students stealing from one another. I don't know how to deal with it. I think it's just because I've got another culture in my classroom that I haven't had before. And this particular teacher had been teaching for 14 years. And she said, yeah, that's what it is. It's just because there's another culture in my classroom. That's why I've got this thing. I've never had this before. It's just this year, new culture in my classroom. Now, she was seeing conflict as the problem. She wasn't seeing it as a tool. And when we broke it open in our discussion after we'd had our upper kapa, we said her problem, her micro goal was how to deal with theft. Then she was able to hear some of the other teachers who said, well, I have a parent meeting. And another teacher said, well, I have students of all the same religion as you are. And even though I haven't been teaching for 14 years, I still have theft. So it's not related to religion, so to speak. So she started to see conflict as well, other people are having this. I can bring my conflict to the table. I've got this conflict. I bring it to the table and I get some understanding. I learn from these other teachers that it's not necessarily cultural or religious related. I learn from the other teachers that I could hold a parent meeting. Then our last question on that screen is, what if we saw deliberation as essential? So when we deliberate, that's taking the conflict one step further and going, okay, you've got a different idea than me. I've got a different idea. How can we maybe take some of my idea and some of your idea and see them as essential as taking different ideas to our own growth? And in the case of the teacher I was just talking to you about, she actually did have a parent meeting, and she found out from this particular parent that this student had actually been having problems for all of their school career, which was several years, but this teacher had never talked to the previous teachers. So when she started deliberating and saying to the parent, hey, we've got this problem of theft, hey, your student has been doing this, your child has been doing this, she started to deliberate with the parent. She got more information, she got that intimacy, and then she was able to move through and find growth and find solutions for herself and her whole class.
So that's I like it because it actually. Okay, so Lala, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Are you ready? Okay, so here it is. Lala, darling, how would conflict as a tool work in your department?
Well, that's actually very hard to answer. But let me just reflect on what I have experienced in Darwin. I was having numerous conflicts when I came to you and Andrew, right? Because I came with a genre-based approach principles in my head. I brought that proposal based on the systemic linguistics approach in academic writing pedagogy. But then you said, no, we would do something else. We
Oh
would
no no no!
approach blah 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 blah. All right. So that's actually the very first conflict I had. But I used that as a positive tool for learning, because gradually I learned from you, Andrew, that learning can be approached differently, right? So I try to develop a gradual confidence in learning new stuff with you, Andrew, and it finally did work out. And then in the case of my department, well, I'm trying at the moment uh, to tell to my colleagues that we can actually approach language learning in a completely different way, because the policy from UNESCO, UNICEF, and also from ASEAN, from Indonesian government say we have to devise a completely new strategies, approach, philosophy in teaching. Even we have that very strong phrase called new paradigm of learning in the curriculum. So when it comes to approaching the new language approach in English language studying, for example, then we have to think differently. We have to think in unique ways and blah blah blah. And I think, well, it's kind of a struggle, Anya, but my students and I in my research team are getting more aware that doing rhythm, doing intonation, doing movement in classroom are essential to the learning progress, and they gradually develop the confidence. I think I can invest more in my students rather than with my peers, because it's going to take some time, to develop new approach to learning. But I'm completely aware that the path to self growth or self improvement is not a fixed one. So it's different for every one of us. So this personal journey has to be preceded by, deep reflection and careful planning. And I'm also aware that the road to self-development is not for the faint-hearted, if you wish to say so, because it demands constant attention and full commitment. We have to bring new mindsets. We have to create, let's say, a new self growth in relation to the curriculum and blah blah blah. But I think um, I have some points to address in relation to what Christine has addressed. In Indonesia, there is a growing perception that our conventional educational establishments are outdated and were originally created to meet the needs of an earlier era of mass production and industrialization. And repeated research and presentations, such as those found in TED Talks, for example, have emphasized how the intense emphasis on superficial knowledge that is assessed through conventional exams causes both students and teachers to leave school. And many current curriculum standards, alongside standardized assessments that primarily measure content reproduction, are the greatest barriers to the new pedagogy that requires the element of teacher growth. So my question is, does teacher growth exist at all in this case? And then how can we align the personal and professional growth of an English teacher or teacher in general in a stream of professional training? What do you think?
Oh, it's a great question. And if people in the audience want to also put some comments in the comments space, they can add to that as well. But I'll just take the first stab at your question. I think what we need to think about is, how can we marry exactly what Lala said? How can we marry that social with professional together? And in my case, the findings and the conclusions that I put together in my PhD, I suggested that actually we give teachers opportunity for choice. Often there's a lot of stagnation. We say we have to go to this staff meeting after school this particular day per week, and there's no choice in the matter. And the person who's up the front at the seminar or the professional development meeting basically just talks at you, and there's not a lot of interaction. What I did in my research was actually I went and visited 14 different locations across Indonesia, and I asked some regional contacts at each of those places to gather me a group of teachers together. And I said, who would be interested in learning from others about diversity and unity? So we actually had a theme. Our theme was diversity and unity and peace. And we were going to look at what would the Pancasila look like if we actually embodied it. Now, the Pancasila, for those who aren't in Indonesia, is actually the core values of Indonesia, and it basically says we want unity and diversity. And so I asked the teachers, look, this is your big focus, according to the government, is this Panchasila, this unity and diversity. Who wants to have a talk to other people who actually come from diverse backgrounds? And let's see what we learn together. So at those 14 locations, I recruited teachers who said, yes, we're up for that. And I asked them, what's your preferred time? We were dealing with 3 different time zones, so it was a little bit difficult, but some people wanted an evening one, so we had an evening time, and other ones wanted a middle of the day, which, like I said, there were 3 hours difference in our time zone, so it wasn't perfect for everyone. But basically, number one, they had choice. They had choice of when they could attend. They had choice whether they wanted to attend. And I submitted that they should have choice on the topic as well. Because teachers know what they want to talk about. Teachers know what they want help with. Teachers know what their professional growth is. And so if we offer teachers a range of topics, then they can say, yes, I want to join this group and this time works for me. And if we get a facilitator who can really know how to bring people together and draw on that conflict, draw on that diversity. In my case, I got to be the facilitator, and I had quite a bit of training interacting with diversity as a cross-cultural learner myself, having lived in numerous different cities around Indonesia and actually across the globe. So I drew on my own experience of cross-cultural learning to draw these other people out to share from their cultural backgrounds. And so having a facilitator that can draw people out and actually having some really great stimuli that we can all work from. We found that really good. All the teachers most of the teachers in the reflections at the end said, yes, we had some animations and we had some talks from professionals that we all talked about. After we'd listened to the professional, then we had a group of questions, and we talked about what the professional expert had talked about together, and did we understand it? So we had this time away from the expert where we could debunk and demystify what was talked about, but it was all over to choice, and it was all in a place of respect. So we were all given, with the facilitator, given time to talk. And that's, I hope, an answer to your question, Lala. First of all, choice of time, choice of topic, and having a really great facilitator and content.
All
So
right,
that's
thank you.
question 1 or question 2?
That was Lala's question about what can we do to revitalize professional development. Yeah?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say something, because Lala said that he came to Darwin, and I said, no, we're not going to do that. It wasn't like that. And so let me straighten the story so that you actually understand things better in terms of today's topic. So Lala has been offered scholarships in Australia with very famous people. And then someone said to him, well, why do you want to do what everybody else is doing? Why don't you just check that stuff with that woman from Charles Darwin University? And so he sent me an email with his very learned and beautifully described argument for his proposal, what he's going to do and all of that. So I said to him, my comment was, so we were on email, and he talked about the the systemic functional linguistics and the genre approach to literacy. All that's been done now for the last 20 so 40 years in Australia. 50 years it's been around. So my question to him was, it's all good, where is the student in the model? And instantly, while still in Indonesia, Lala answered, I'm coming to Darwin. I want to study with you. So the reason why I'm saying this was that obviously you can see from this exchange that Lala didn't come to study with me because
You were the same.
I was the same. He came not only because there was a difference, which is what he already has heard from his other colleagues in Indonesia. Come to Australia, to Anya, you do something else. But I'm not saying even that, although this is a very good point, Christine. Lala was invested in conflict or in research as an inquiry into differences, right? Lala was not invested in fame. Lala was not invested in being a good boy propagating the same story for the last 50 years, whether it's a good or bad story. What Lala wanted to find out, if I am to live as a scholar for the next 50 years, and if there are contrasting paradigm, I am going to be engaged in exploring or working with those contrasts to see what I want to do, how I can follow now after the PhD actually as a scholar. So my keyword here is investment.
And seeking change.
So investment in seeking conflict for change, for
Yes,
positive
for
change.
Yeah.
So investment in seeking conflict for positive change. So you do it at the individual level, and I think that you also have to do it as an institution. Because if the institution is not interested in in investment in conflict for positive change, what will happen is that scholars will still do their own research and maybe do good things, but their work will not feed the department.
The community.
It will feed someone else or something else, whatever. The department itself or the school or whatever will not benefit. I'm just going to leave that point with Christine and see how she would comment on that.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to enter it from a roundabout way. So I'm not going to enter directly, and hopefully my Javanese and Sundanese audience out there will understand we're going to go indirectly. What I want to show you next is another slide. Hang on, the mouse is over here. No, hang on. Oh, there you go. I'll keep going. I want to move over to this slide here. So what happened in my research is I looked at people's coming together. I had this gut feeling that if I could bring these people together to do an embodiment of unity and diversity and just allow it to flow, that what we would come up with was going to be insightful. And as I analysed the teachers' discussions, right from the very start, I asked them, what are your interests? Hang on, I may just move on one moment. Here's some sample introductions. So we've got Pheeney. She's saying, good evening, I'm from Pontianak. What's important to me is that we can work together and we can develop understanding of each other and between us. I think it's important that teachers teach our students to have behaviour that is mutually tolerant of any diversity. So that she started out, and I think this is very important, coming back to what Lala said, we need an opportunity to say, what do we want out of our professional development? So here's Pheeney. She's saying this, when we're analysing what Pheeney says, okay, there's a little bit of situatedness. She tells us she's from Pontianak. She tells us what's important to her. So what she thinks is important is that we can work together and develop understanding. And then she tells us that the goal is that we can teach our students to have behaviour that's mutually tolerant. So let's go back to that last map. I mapped out all of the teachers' responses, and what I came out was there's actually, you can see in the green, there's 6 different things basically that were in just about every teacher's comments. So here's the first one's the subjects, the agentive teacher. Here was Pheeney saying, this is what I want to see. This is who I am. I'm Pheeney, I'm from Pontianak. This is what I want to see. Okay. Also, she started to say the rules of the engagement, we should be able to learn and have understanding between each other. She said, who is it? It's each other, the community. We need to be in relationship with each other. And she had the division of labour that we were going to learn from each other. So it wasn't just one person talking. And she told us her micro and micro goals. She wanted unity and diversity, and she wanted to be able to teach her students. And how did this all come together? Up the top is the mediating tool. And in this case, I'm calling it the course because that was just a shorter. My supervisor, for those of you who are Indonesia, I had it as an acronym, like P3K or something like that. He said, no acronyms, just call it the course. So my course basically asked all the teachers, and this triangle figure that you see is actually cultural historic activity theory, visualizing a pattern of thinking. Now, the outcomes is in a light blue there because it's actually an unknown at this moment. We've all got hopes, that's our object of what we want to see, our goals, but it's actually an unknown what will come out, but hopefully some sense and meaning making will come out. So what happens, I'm still coming back to you, Anya, with your question. What happens is when we have people come together like Pheeney and can say, this is what I want to see, this is how it's going to happen, these are the rules, this is who it's going to be with, this is the division of labour, we're going to deliberate together, I've got these goals. It's actually, you can see all those lines in the triangle, one's going from here to there, they're all sort of interconnect. That's how a normal thinking pattern should be. People should be able to be subjects. Subject just basically means they're agentive. They can make choices for themselves, okay? So all of these things is natural. But actually what did happen is, even though Pheeney and all of her friends, each one, you can read this at some other time if you want to read my thesis, they're all in there. There's all the teachers, and here's the sample goals. I pulled apart all of the conversations, and I got micro goals and personal struggles, and I got context goals and macro struggles. Basically, as we started talking, we realized there were a lot of roadblocks to our thinking. And this is one of the other teachers, Augustina. She was quick to say that she felt alienated. She saw a man from Dewey. Dewey is a tribal group in Indonesia who have no electricity and live very much in the traditional way. They weave all their clothes and they have bamboo walls, no electricity, like I said, and grow all their food, no shops. It's just all very community orientated. Anyway, some of them are allowed to have phones. And fortunately for us, the one guy who was part of our study, he is there sitting with his bamboo walls and chickens walking in front of him and his little kid on his lap, and he's there in his Bedoui headdress. And Augustina, who happened to be from Papua, which is the other side of Indonesia, saw him, and she just not quite exploded, but she's like, how come I have never been able to see Awan before? I should be able to see all of the people in Indonesia because they tell me my country is unity and diversity, but I have never even experienced this diversity. And so off she went in her tyrant rage of, we don't have any reciprocity happening. I never get to see Awan ever before this opportunity of the course. I do have media telling me, and I have school texts, but they tell me that unity and diversity, what it is, but they expect me to be peaceful, but I've got no involvement. I've got no relational community. And she basically said, my sense making has been blocked because I don't get to deliberate. And I'm just going to skip through a little bit. Is it okay if I tell you a couple of other roadblocks?
Go on.
Yeah, this is another person. This is another one of the teachers. His name was Daniel. His thinking, he actually came from Malang, this guy, and he had a very independent life. When I asked him about how do you cooperate, because we're talking about unity and diversity, we're talking about deliberation, I said, how do you cooperate in your community, Daniel? And he said, no, there's absolutely no cooperation. I don't have anything to do with cooperation in my community. And I was stunned, shocked, and amazed. And I tried to think to him, I said, well, don't you see people growing rice? I'm sure in Malang, I've been there myself, there is people growing rice. He said, I never see it. I said, don't you wear batik clothing and people have stamped the beautiful patterns on it? No, I never see it. And I'd ask him all these questions, and he said, no, I have nothing to do with cooperation in my life. And what basically it came down to, I said to him, well, how do you get rice? Obviously somebody's grown it. And he goes, yeah, I just get it from the supermarket. So his reciprocity is basically an exchange. One person gives something, another person gives something back. So it's a flow. It's not just all one way. So his reciprocity was his consumer going to the shop, buying his rice. He was compliant and encouraged to indulge in buying things from the shop, but he had no relationships. He's the next box. Oh, sorry. Let's go back there. Next box, there's no connection. There's only red arrows to the community. There's no connection to the deliberation. So he had a quiet life, avoiding conflict, so he thought, but he had only a focus on consumerism and no focus on growth. Another one, this is another lady. She was, I'm sorry, I give these people, it's probably not the nicest adjectives. Got independent Daniel, alienated Augustina, and narcissistic intern. But before the course opportunity, these teachers, their thinking pattern that we saw earlier, this one here, that should be all flowing, all green arrows everywhere, it was disrupted because there was no relational community fed Daniel, no deliberative involvement. And for interns, she had deliberative involvement. Sorry, when it went to PowerPoint, the slide skewed a bit. But the deliberative involvement is that box on the bottom right corner. Now, her deliberative involvement was just inside her head. This is the same lady I'm telling you about that had the theft in her class. And all she could think of was, I can't approach the parents. I can't do anything. I can't talk to the principal. It's all just going to be a big problem if I talk to anybody. And she felt, you can see in the pink box in the middle of the screen, she felt helpless. She felt completely helpless because she had no activity for suppression because she was indirect cultural customs. And
Indirect culture. Can you explain it?
Yes. So basically, and some of my audience out there, I can see there's some people from Cirebon who are Sundanese. Indirect basically means, and you can have a laugh at this and correct me if I'm wrong, basically means if you have a problem, don't go to the person who's directly involved. You may tell your neighbor, and this on the other side, and then that neighbor may tell somebody else, and so say this neighbor on my house this side, he has a very noisy family. And I tell the neighbor on this side, I say, oh, those people, they've got a bird. But it's not a bird. It's a very indirect. You don't say it's a person. It's a bird. And then that one will talk. And all the way around until it gets to about 15 neighbors, will this person realize that I've got a conflict with them and it's never been directly said. It had to be indirectly said all around the whole neighborhood before there's any change. Now that's trying to avoid conflict by indirect means. Very unsuccessful, very annoying, very a big problem. For Intan in her life, she couldn't go directly to the parent because her inside her brain was saying, I can't make up conflict, I can't deal with things directly. But the moment she actually broke out of that routine, broke out of that habit, and re-established this rhythm, this pattern that we've got that should be all the green arrows everywhere, the moment she stepped out of that and went back to her reciprocity and then said to the parent, hey, I've got this problem with your son, then she was able to deal with it. She could start up the community by talking to people. She could start up the reciprocity. Instead of having her worry and fear, she could now deliberate. Okay, well, how about at home you do this? How about at school I do this? Let's help this kid get his act together. How about I talk to the headmaster? How about I talk to the other teachers? How about we figure out what as a school we're going to do about theft? And then they could solve the problem. So indirectly to your question, Anya, was how do we help people when they're stuck and they're not using conflict as a tool? I think that's the gist of your question. I've reworded it, sorry. But the gist of how do we help people who are stuck in these routines, and how do we get them back into their own rhythms? Well, basically is actually by getting them to talk to each other and having time between talking to each other. And that's another thing back to Lala's question. How do we help teachers with professional goals? Is we give them time to think about it. Now, this scheduled course that I had, we had teachers meeting weekly. So only once a week, they came back and they could say, I tried this, but it didn't quite work. And then another teacher could say, well, did you do this? And another teacher could say, well, yeah, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? So in our professional development, we're getting contrasting views, and one may work, one may partly work. We can build on it. We don't have to build and solve all problems like this. We can work through problems with time. So having time to reflect and help each other re-establish those routines. And in my study, what actually happened was they unblocked their sense-making framework. They, in turn, became agentive. She exchanged those ideas and she shared the responsibility. She had interactive communication and strategy, and she was able to support the student learning. So what happens is we re-establish those goals by getting those social patterns into our professional role, into our professional realm. So having the time to be able to say, apa kabar, what's the news? What's happening in your classroom? What are your micro goals? What are your micro goals? Working through these 6 points on the triangle in a relational way. And the funny thing is, Dewey would say, oh, we must work through these step. But the indigenous knowledge person would say, well, just let it flow. And I actually let it flow. We didn't actually use these steps at all. We just let it flow. We let the teachers talk, and they will tell you in their reflections that they got a lot out of it professionally as well as personally. So I don't think we have to separate personal from professional.
Andrew, I see you're nodding and you have something to comment. I will not ask you a specific question because I think that you can take it from here a little bit forward.
Well, I'm nodding in terms of general principles. I'm interested in the notion of conflict. I mean, conflict has many different shapes and sizes. If people hate each other, it's unlikely that they will use conflict in a positive kind of way. They will perhaps use it to put each other down. So I think you have to be a bit careful. And if the conflict, I mean, there's an assumption that we're going to do all of these things and it's going to work, and everything will be okay in the end because we talked through it and we came to a compromise situation. Part of the problem is the fact that compromises are always compromises and that they're not necessarily coherent in terms of the principles that put them together. So I'm not against anything that you said, Christine, at all. I mean, I agree that we need a peaceful world where people get opportunities to contrast and compare, basically, and confront each other with their ideas, and try to find what we call common ground. But common ground is not necessarily solutions for intellectual problems, because intellectual problems may not be solvable, may be logically impossible to bring together. We may have very different situations. What struck me a little bit with your diagram is that I do work in rhizomatic systems, and rhizomatic systems are essentially free systems which are multidimensional, and where people have, or students at least, have the right to do whatever it is that they feel they need to do, and have opportunities to connect with whoever they need to connect with in order to solve their personal problems, personal learning problems. I think that within the teaching profession we tend to we tend to transform people into statistical models rather than trying to get into their heads as they are dealing with the here and now problems that they're facing. Here and now is very much a question of, I need help now, and it's got to look like this, or at least I need some solutions to achieve my objective. My objective may not be the same as yours, but it's part of my learning process, so that I can get to whatever we want to get to. And I'm thinking particularly of stuff like language work, where we have a clash between the things that I can do and the needs on a moment-to-moment basis for solving the linguistic or other problem that I may have in front of me. And I tend to use the word language in a very broad sense. It's not about past, present, futures, prepositions, and things like that, but it could be. It could include them. So I think we're into a kind of conflict resolution structure. And what I like about it is that you can finish up with multidimensional solutions, but it's based primarily on the notion that we will find a solution, as opposed to maybe we will never find a solution. The issue is at the end of the day is how do we get together in a multicultural world where in the end it's very difficult to get away from the notion that we are all different from each other and that we all function within our own idiocultures. And so the essential element, it seems to me, in all of these things is to have goodwill and to try to understand each other rather than trying to score points off each other.
Yeah, there is.
I mean, if otherwise the solution. Otherwise, you're not going to have any kind of conflict which will be positive. I mean, it's nice to. I like the idea of conflict. I like the idea of conflict as a positive set of interactions, basically. But it's very difficult sometimes to mediate, well, not just mediate by having expert mediators there, but mediate between yourself and the rest of humanity, a position that you will be able to accept, because in the end, and I still think that's probably true, in the end, a compromise, while a lovely social outcome, is not necessarily a good theoretical outcome. You see what I'm saying? I was on many boards in Australia, boards of secondary school studies and language boards where we had to work out curriculum and syllabus committees. We had to work out Hello. Okay, you're back. We had to work out how to develop a syllabus for French or for German or for Italian or for Russian or whatever. I was in the languages area, and in the end, we had to put together content and other things which had to have the input of this religious group and that religious group and this linguistic group and that linguistic group. And there was a difference between the Vietnamese from Vietnam and the Vietnamese who had migrated to Australia in 1975. So in the end, you finish up with a kind of mishmash rather than a theoretically coherent structure.
Yeah, but
And
let
so,
me.
Yes, and if I'll say one more thing, then I'll be quiet. But in terms of professional development, one of the issues with professional development is yes, let's talk to each other and so on, but talking to each other about what? I mean,
Right.
How would you construct a professional development program for teacher education? And you might say, okay, well, Dewey was a detailed, I don't think he was, but anyway, let's say he was a detailed person, and in indigenous philosophies, you take a more global perspective. Okay, I can tell you that in my work in phonetics, I take a global perspective, and people in the phonetics world take a low level perspective. which is a kind of additive model of, I take this sound and put this sound next to it and so on. So in a sense, I can understand the conflict between cultures and the different points of view. So how do you make the bridge? And in the end, how do you get to something that makes sense theoretically, not just something which makes sense socially?
So you have to take it outside of the pool of the people who are now talking to each other. You need to diversify, dare I say, your the pool of people, and work towards a goal. And the goal could be the personal goal of a teacher who is taking the conversation and testing, as Christine suggested. But another suggestion is another way is for teachers to do what we did in. Oh no, I don't want to see just my pretty face. Sorry, can we get it back? Another way is to engage with the university so that they can help you engage those diverse perspectives from the community, and now engage them in projects so that we can test them, so that we can actually theorize them. So, and I think that feeds back to another, I just take two sentences, I'll just say. So that feeds to some other issue that I might have raised before, but about investment, personal and institutional investment. I think it's important to have institutional investment, because then you model the culture of dialogue and you model the culture of solving problems through inquiry, theorization, and informed solutions as a result. I think it's very negative when you say, okay, friends, today we have a new paradigm. It is this particular method. All of you are going to do this method. What it does, it's
No connection.
no connection to anything, and you are outsourcing your brain to someone else, consequently giving up on your brain. And you may think it's a good thing, but I will have you know that you have children, and you are all modeling behavior to your children. Forget about the kids in the school, forget about your colleagues. Whatever we do, we are never in one context of behavior. So,
Can I address a little bit of this one?
can you write it down first? And I just wanted to go to the next thing. Can you write it down for yourself just to remember?
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say, okay, maybe you can address it, and then I will take it to the next to try to solve the problem of suicides that someone
connected to that.
Yeah. So you
Yeah, so connected to what the discussion's been going on, we've got a very important aspect of respect. And thanks, Andrew, for pointing out there are many other details that we still have to work out as we pull a professional development together. But one of the key things that some of our audience have been writing in about is a very serious problem, and it's students struggling with suicide, with that continuing to rise day by day. And that's a very serious issue, and we do need to address it as professional development. And what I would encourage is that, we do bring this same idea of social and this rhythm to interaction. We have to treat students as subjects. In our triangle before, we had the teacher as the subject, but in our relationships with the students, each student should be an agent themselves. They should be able to make their own choices. They should be able to act with reciprocity. They should be feeling part of a community. They should have opportunity for deliberative involvement. They should have a place to air their goals and to get support for that. And that's that mediating from the teacher and the family. And remember, the bottom underneath that mediation is the community. It is a community thing. We need to deal with suicide. It's not just a one-on-one thing. We need to have people feel like they're part of a community. And part of the things sometimes is that they don't feel they have anything to bring to the community, because maybe the community is saying we only value this level of academia, or we only value this direction. But if we have diversity and we're valuing diversity in a community, the students get an opportunity to express themselves, to be who they are, to be those agentive people. And we need, for teachers in their professional growth and their professional learning times, to have opportunities to experience this agentive sense, so that they can also immerse their own students in that same agentive aspect. And that was one of the things that came out of my research, is in their reflections, the teachers said, I now know how to treat students as individuals and to respect their diversity. And when we're talking about suicide, that is one of the issues. There are other issues, but I would encourage and love to be part of, if there's some opportunity in the future, to make a professional development for teachers that is based on those same principles that we talked about before, about choice for the teachers. That, and Andrew said, what are we giving the teachers choice? We have to give teachers choice on, and ask teachers, what would you like professional development in? And then our institutional support needs to come alongside. The teachers are saying we know how to support our students who are struggling with suicide. Then get some experts on board that will take the teachers and give them an immersion experience, so that they can create that same experience for their students.
But rather than by talking down to teachers,
Yeah.
and saying, oh, here is the recipe.
No, you cannot do that. It
This is how you do
involvement.
it. Today we're going to have a professional development on how to
Deal with suicide.
deal with whatever. So how to make the student into a subject. So this is how you do it. Bang, 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 bang,
No
bang.
recipes are involved.
So I think that, unfortunately, that we all come out from a culture, all of us, doesn't matter what race and what background we have, because educational traditions run across the globe, whereby we expect to be taught a paradigm. But as I said, what comes with the paradigm, other than a recipe, is outsourcing our brains and basically removing the brains from our head. I just wanted to actually come back to this question from the audience on suicide and link this with what Christine said. So I went to Cambodia and I looked at how people now in Cambodia integrate educational reform at the university level, but also in schools. And the professor of education in Professor Sofsok in Royal University of Phnom Penh actually gave a speech or gave a presentation. And I've seen amazing stuff. So what they did, they decided to throw away all the Western models. And Professor Sofsok, he's a graduate from Monash or something like that. So from Melbourne. And Professor Sofsok, if you thought I was passionate and enthusiastic, you should see him. So it's not that he threw it away as useless, but he came with that informed perspective and now basically introduced a new paradigm, on new ways, which are about the school being part of the community rather than the yellow walls. So what he did say I will give you an example what they did. It wasn't about suicide, but something similar. And I'll show you how they solved it. So basically the father, there was a girl doing pretty well in, I think it was a high school. So the father removed her from high school, so she wasn't coming into the high school. So the school is already working with groups from the community. The community does all kinds of things, participates in monitoring students' exams, donates to the schools, donate time to the school. They donate time to the school as well. So whatever skills, means, and time they have, they work very well with the school. So don't get me on the detail here. However, the community learned that a student was removed from the school. The community knew that the father was was, had a drinking habit, and consequently needed the girl to work so that he could drink. I don't know what other habits he had, but it was destructive enough for the future of the girl, right? So the community interfered by discussion, by talking, by gathering together with the father and so on. And father sort of, okay, and I can't remember whether they offered also help to the father. But to cut the very long story short, the girl came back to the school. Then she won a scholarship to go to the university, and she's studying for medicine. So the details of it might be sourced directly from Professor Sovsok, or maybe might be worked out with the model that Christine is suggesting. However, that collaboration on a human level, not on a formal level, but on the human level, that we're all humans, actually resulted in a positive interaction between the community, the father, without necessarily dragging the kid to the school, sending the police and all of that, which would have probably happened in Australia. There's no community in Australia. We would have just sent the police and put the father in jail all of the time, like totally dehumanizing strategies and not working for anyone. I'll leave room now for Lala to comment, and maybe for Christine then, and we will finish our discussion for the day, and maybe introduce the topic for next week. Lala, any comments?
Yeah, I think there is one core element in teacher education program that is missing, and that is actually well-being and agency.
Yeah.
The traditional curriculum of ALT in my department has not explored those concepts properly. So we are now working very hard to adopt the concepts of agency and well-being, because that's actually also the policy from UNESCO. And I think another thing that we have to do is we have to focus more on the students, and we have to forget a little bit on the reproduction of content, because it seems to me that the current curriculum is still reproducing the same content over and over again, and it does not produce a genuine and deep learning. I think it's important for us to build a new paradigm where the new curriculum should focus on the deep learning, where creating and using new knowledge in the world. So we have to go beyond the mastery of existing knowledge, and we have to focus more on the process of learning, and we have to build a better relationship with students, I think, in the form of mentorship. And then this is not actually the skill that is traditionally developed in the professional certification program of the teachers. And then we have to address another part in the curriculum, that is actually the learning outcomes. Maybe we have to think of it in a new way. Like, I think the new way of measuring the learning outcomes would be having the capacities to build new knowledge and to lead their own learning effectively. And I think when it comes to learning agency and well-being, we can promote a better learning experience, and eventually we can help our learners to have a better learning gain or learning outcomes in the future. So that's my comment, Anya. Thank you.
I think we will focus on that issue in 2 weeks in our next podcast. I think we need to talk about it. I've just written a paper. Anyone who's going to reviewing the paper, pass it. Anyway, I was looking at the paper. I mean, I was writing the paper, and then exactly that, which is what you are saying, the issue how, despite the transformative policies
Mm.
uh, in 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 university education and also in school education, right? The policy is in Indonesia to have English learning environments which are community oriented, right? Community
Yeah.
oriented. And yet, when we look at the pedagogy, people teach arbitrary content. So
Mm.
arbitrary means randomly selected as
Right.
relevant. I think we should look at that. I'm just going to leave some time now for Christine to summarize it and tell us whatever matters to have from this discussion. And we will finish for today. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the podcast today.
Thank you, Anya. Yeah, and thank you everyone for being part of it. I'm really glad for those interactions on the comments, that it's bringing it to what is a macro and a micro goal for you. And I encourage you to think about that. I encourage you to think about that and bring that to your local person at your schools. Encourage you to bring that into your own classroom. How can you be agentive and help your students to be agentive? And the key thing, I think, is asking those what if questions. I hope you'll refer to those what if questions for yourself to play around with your current routine. Change it up. Look at those what ifs. What if we start merging social with professional? What if, here we go, thank you, Anya. What if we spent some time reflecting? Let's not just move from one activity to the next activity. Let's stop. Let's think, what do I want out of my professional development? Bring that to your staff members. Bring that even to your students. What do you need out of this class? And yeah, obviously, if you're subject specific, they'll have some content goals, but also there's room for personal goals as well. And take some time. What does it look like to deliberate input? For my teachers, it's not expecting people to change within. You might say, I'm presenting this idea, and you might have presented an idea to Lalo when he came to do his PhD. He didn't have to grab it and go, oh, I'm in with this on the first day. He could say, please explain, or what do you mean by this, or how does this work, and start thinking what she's talking about. He didn't just straight away believe it just because somebody else had said it. And that's what's so crucial about deliberating, is taking time to think about what somebody said. It's gaining that intimacy. That's how we started the conversation with Andrew. Gaining that intimacy, that into you I see. You're telling me this. Why have you come to that conclusion? Tell me, how does this work in your life? Ask lots of why and how questions. Deliberate. Then go away and think about it and go, I thought about that and I've got another question. Come back to each other with lots of questions. That's what deliberating is all about. And you may agree with them or you may not. That's okay. But it's important to get that intimacy, important to understand each other, so that some of it we may take on and some of it we may leave by the wayside. So I encourage you to deliberate. I encourage you to ask questions. That's how professional growth is really going to flourish, when you've got opportunity for that reciprocity and that deliberative involvement.
And eventually, like at the school level, invite scholars to join your discussions so that we can actually raise the level of abstraction, and then theorize it a little bit, back it up with something stronger, so that the school has stronger basis to move forward. So that's just from me. If anyone else wants to comment,
I have
please.
just one short one,
Yeah.
but then we'll come. We didn't have time for it today, but you'll see there are 5 points there, and on the triangle, I'll just quickly flip through it very quickly. For those, Enya was just saying, connected to theory, what I did find was that those points on the triangle actually do connect to each of Indonesia's Panchasillas. So if you're interested in more on that, you can actually look up my PhD thesis. It is available online, and you can learn a little bit more about how that theory of the Panchasila can connect to our everyday behaviours. And I'd love to talk to you more about that some other time. But yeah, it's been great to be here today.
Thank you so much. Andrew, Lala, done for today?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we will talk more. Andrew, did you want to comment something?
No. I just wanted to say thank you to Christine. I thought it was
Thank you.
really spot on. And we need to keep these things in mind as we navigate, as we go swaying from left to right down the path of wherever we're traveling to, assuming we actually know where we're going. And so I think it was a very nice, very, very nice meeting we had today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
We press that orange one.
Christine, can I have your email